So this was one of the Kit Bash model sets, the Victorian, that I put together. And what I wanted to do today was delve into a little bit of Arnold, since Arnold is the renderer that comes standard with Maya, and I've gotten questions from people on how to use it just in a generic standpoint, or how would I replicate what I've done with the other renderers. So for me, it's more kind of trying to make like the physical sky shader setup. So what you can do in Arnold, I'll go through maybe two, three different ways to light like an outdoor scene with it. So under the Arnold tab, you have lights, and what we want to do is we'll make a Skydome. So here we go with the Skydome light, and you get these parameters. And let me just kick off a render in Arnold, and we'll see what we've got. Okay, so this is what we get right out of the box with the Arnold Skydome render. So basically kind of gives you an ambient occlusion kind of look to it, which is, pretty decent. But, we can take it a little further. So under the color tab, what you could do is you can plug in an HDRI sky. So let me just find one. We're in Mono Lake right now. HDR. Just try that. And what you want to do when you're plugging in an HDR image, under the color space, you want to switch it to RAW instead of sRGB. So here you can see in the background the actual HDR is there. And then this is the render we're getting out with the HDR. So you get the tinting from everything. But let's see if we can swing the light so it faces more what we want. So to do that, we want to rotate the dome light. So here we just rotate. Let me go the other way, see if we can get light in our scene. So maybe something like that. And here we get something more like this, where you're getting a little bit more of the directionality coming from that angle. So that's one way to basically do HDRI. And then the other thing is, if we go to the alpha, it's full. So what you can do is, if you scroll down under our Skydome visibility, if you go to camera and you turn that to 0, and now if we render, and all we've basically done is change the visibility of the HDRI image back there. So now if we go, and we'll get proper cutouts with our alphas for our element. Now let me change this light name. So I'm going to call this HDR lighting as one way to do it. And what we'll do is, now we want to see like a physical sky lighting scenario. So what we want to do is basically, under the render settings, Arnold renderer, if you go under environment, and if you click on background, you want to create a physical sky shader, and now you'll get this physical sky popping up. So let me turn off that, and then let's do a test render. So now I've turned off the HDR lighting, and now the physical sky itself is the only thing rendering in this scene. And now if we go back to our alpha, you can see it's all full because of how the physical sky shader works. Everything's encapsulated. And you can see here we have a line for basically where the sky ends. So that's kind of our horizon line. So what we can either do is expand out our ground plane so that it matches to that level. So let me select the ground, we'll go to perspective. Let's expand it way out. Go back to our camera, and I'll do a render. And now you can see we filled up the horizon line, so that goes to the edge of the horizon in our scene. And this is what the physical sky is giving us straight out of the box. So now basically, if we look in here, you don't see the physical sky at all. It basically is hidden in basically the materials. So here's the physical sky. I just clicked on it. Now it's active. The other way that you could go to it is back with the render settings, and then just click on under the environment, and there you go. So there's two ways that you can call it back up. There's some parameters within here that we can talk about, but basically what you want to do is you want to link up your physical sky with a actual Arnold Skydome. So let's bring in the Skydome. So you can see now I just rendered again. So this has the Skydome in our scene and the physical sun. Oh, sorry, physical sky, Arnold shader. And the whiteness that we're getting in the scene now is because the light of the sky from the Skydome light is white. So what we want to do is we want to connect the physical sky node to the Skydome light. So what you want to do is basically with the Skydome light on or selected, middle mouse click your physical sky shader and then just drag it into the color. And then now basically the two are linked. So now if we just click on our Skydome, we have the Skydome, and if we click over two tabs, you have the physical sky. So now if we do a render, so now you can see a much better render comes out, because basically we're combining the two. So now we've got the sky, the ambient sky dome itself coming from the physical sky, and then what we've got from the actual sky dome is the direct light cast by the light, and then the shadow tones are being affected by this dome. So what's great about this now is with some of these parameters in the physical sky, we'll be able to angle and change the sun position. So if you see in here, this is our sky dome for the physical sky, and basically the elevation and azimuth, basically the azimuth is basically the rotation of the sky in 360 degrees, and then the elevation is how high or how low our sky will be. So if we move it, you can see here in that little pocket, the sky now is a little bit lower. And just like we've seen in other renderers, like Mental Ray, Physical Sun and Sky, basically I've lowered the angle of the sun on the horizon, so it's lower, so it's more of a morning or sunset angle, and the temperature of the sky and everything is changed with this. So it's a really nice interactive general renderer that you can see still is rendering pretty fast for all the geo to scope out a little bit more of a complex lighting scenario. So let me position it in a couple different ways. So now you can see I've basically lowered the sun even more, and then I've moved the angle of the sun in the sky from 360 where it's facing. So now sun is basically coming from this direction. It's probably just outside of our angle area, and then you've got this really orangey sun glow. So what I would still want to do in something like this is I'm using these two combined elements to render this, but I probably would replace out the sky with a better sky that I want. But there's different elements that you can do in here. Turbidity, basically you can increase this up to 10, and basically you're increasing the particulates and dirt in the air. So if you go all the way to like 10, you'll get something that's basically a little bit more dirty. The saturation level of the sky obviously is taken down, so there's just a level of dirt. 2 to 3 is a good ratio. The standard comes in at like 3. Ground albedo is basically how reflective and bright the ground can be to reflect back into your scene. So you can see it allows a little bit more light to bounce up. Not a whole lot, but it does affect it slightly. Elevation is how high the sun is in the sky. Azimuth is the rotation of 360 degrees around us. Intensity, you can increase the intensity of how strong the sky is. So there, everything just got brighter in the scene. Now you can also go back into the dome light and increase its intensity. So that's what this render is, and then what we had before. So I raised it to a 3, but the intensity used to be 1, so now you get a little bit brighter in here. So these two can work really well in conjunction with each other. So they're really useful. You can have a whole different level of interactivity. You can just animate the sky, you can do all kinds of different things. But the main thing is using these two in conjunction are a really nice way to get some really good lighting right off the bat, and then further strategize for how detailed you want your light setup to be. So let me call this one Physical Sky. And then the third one is kind of a custom light, where basically you're going to be doing an indirect illumination with a direct illumination. So for the indirect, we'd use a Skydome light, and then the direct illumination, we would use a directional light. So let's take that. So let's move this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this one off now. And then let's go into the render settings. And what you can do is, instead of deleting, you can just turn off this physical sky. So you basically disconnect it, so it's no longer hooked up. But it's not deleted, it's still in our scene right there. So it's basically allowing it to still live in our scene file but not be used at this time. So let's go back into Arnold and lights, and we'll make a new Skydome light. Comes in as basic white, so let's just give this, let's say, like a bluish light. Maybe not so saturated. Maybe something like that. Something like that. So right now I'm just doing the Skydome light as a single color. So here you can see it's just kind of a blue-gray light coming through. So then now I want to add the directional light, so it's just creating a regular light, directional light, that comes into the scene. So if I scale this directional light up and move it so we see it. So as we know with directional lights, it just matters for the angle that you give it. So let me turn this back up. So if we turn this, have this go down, have it start to point. So now the directional light is casting our light from this angle, and we're getting a little bit of shadows, and we still get that bounce of the blue from the Skydome. And then basically now you can slightly tint, your Skydome, your directional light, just so it has a little bit of color to it. Not much. Something like that. So now you can see there's a little bit of warmth in the light, and then you can increase the intensity if you want, change the angle, anything you want. So here we have this, it's a little bit stronger, the light starting to rake, we have a shadow side and a bright side, and then you just keep playing till you get that balance of your direct light and your indirect light influence. But the other thing you can do is you can have it where the background here is not so flat, because right now it's just a solid color. So what you could do is introduce a sky shader, and then that's back in the environments tab where we had the physical sky. So what we want to do is just a regular create sky shader. So that'll come in, and now if we do a quick render, by creating that sky shader, that actually goes back to where we were when we first created a Skydome light. Everything goes white because the light of the sky shader itself is light. So what we want to do is two things. So we're going to go into the render stats, and we don't want it to cast shadows. We don't want it to be visible for any of these transmissions. So what I did here is cast shadows is off and visible for diffuse and specular reflections or in a volume. Effectively, we just want this as a sky in the background to have for a little bit, more interesting element. So right now it's just pure white. So what we want to do is go into the color, and what we can do is we can bring in a ramp, and then we can adjust the ramp within there. So we can change the color, we can bring it up, and then bring down the brightness. So you're really just trying to get it where you can see it affecting, and we'll get it where it's very sharp for right now, so it looks kind of ugly like that. And then now you can switch out the color. So for the low horizon, you basically want it to be, for the low horizon you want it to be like maybe an atmospheric color, so maybe like a brown, like that. And then for the upper color, then maybe that will go more with the blue that we were trying to do. And then instead of a linear, you want to do a smooth interpolation. Let's test that.
Okay, and let's see what we got. And we're not seeing that in the background. So, oh yeah, let's make sure that back in our Skydome light, in our visibility, because what we're doing now is the sky shader is replacing what's going to show up as that Skydome. So what we want is we don't want the camera to render that out, the Skydome light, and it's just going to place in our new sky shader to what we set up. So the Skydome light is still influencing with its color the scene, because we have a blue. And then now if we render, great. So now when we render, we'll basically be seeing the sky shader, and then I just need to, I don't have much real estate here in terms of the gradation, so that'll take a little bit to get it to work. Okay, so now you can see the sky is gradating from my blue into my orange, which is going a little cyan in the middle. And what you will notice is the graphics in terms of the viewport isn't really showing, so it took a little bit of massaging to get this to show up on such a narrow band. But that's a way to utilize the sky shader to get the sky in the background. Now something else that we can do with the directional light, I think I didn't mention yet, is we can also soften up these shadows by going into the directional light's angle. So if we do something like 4, large amount, let me render. So here you can see the shadow's outline as it falls away from the object, gives a little bit more of a softer gradation. The further ones are harder to see because of the resolution that I'm rendering at. But it's a nice way to really control the shadow fall off. And one other thing that you can do is we can, instead of using the dome light with a simple color, we could just turn back on our HDR lighting, use that as our ambient light source. Let me go down and make sure the camera is at 0. Let me do a render. And then now you can see our HDR is really influencing that indirect lighting, and it can give you a little bit more of a richer render than just like the simple sky shader, since you're actually using photography for that. And then the only thing you want to make sure is, if we look in a perspective view, let me see if I can find there we go. You just want to make sure that our sun is basically where it is in our HDR. So, typically like the sun's coming from that direction, so we'd want to rotate out our directional light to relatively match that angle. So now our HDR and our directional light are in the same positioning, and then all you need to do is you could rotate them together to move your environment to basically have the lighting that you actually want. So that's just basically a quick scenario of doing a Skydome light, a physical sky shader, and then a custom light using a hybrid approach of both of those. Hope this was useful for anyone, and thanks.